Hello, gluten-free interested people. I'm sure it's a small class today, but hopefully you want to be here. Sorry if I look a tad dishevelled. I have been baking my best ofs, gluten-free bread type things to show you after I give you my little spiel of what I've learnt all day, and it's been very satisfying to have all the recipes work, because when you're in the midst of recipe testing, you can feel like things are just a fluke and everything's outside of your control, but no, like my recipe notes do hold up. And I have troubleshooted my way to recipes that I am proud of, could sell one day, etc. Also, apologies for the non-kitchen-y type setting, but it's just easier here to kind of say what I want to say without my mum getting a cup of tea in the background. So, welcome to everything I know about vegan and gluten-free bread. Whew, the jumbo episode we'd all been waiting for. I am so tired, but I'm going to try my best. A bit of a disclaimer though, if you're looking for a video with all the answers, I'm very much still a work in progress in this field, but I have some nuggets for you to take away and prevent you making a bazillion mistakes and avoid the worst recipes on the internet. So, the first big thing I quickly learnt, and you would probably too, playing around with vegan gluten-free bread, is that they generally get very earthy tasting very quick. What I was trying to do was hit the sweet spot between natural 2-ingredient gluten-free sourdough that tastes like cardboard but you know is good for you, and like supermarket gluten-free Wonder White, which actually is a thing, but sadly it's not vegan. It has egg white powder in it or something. Bummer. The fairy bread memories will lay dormant a little longer. Quickly learned I was probably asking for too much trying to get this balance, but it was what I was setting my sights on. Just something that replicates bread and has ingredients that are recognisable. Yeah, which on the whole I learnt was really wishful thinking, because there's a reason there's all those gums and emulsifiers and binders in gluten-free bread flour mixes and supermarket gluten-free loaves, and I'm not against them. Like, I buy bread with them in them all the time because it's what's out there and they clearly serve a function, but I want to be able to make gluten-free vegan bread at home that I can use bread-like ingredients in and not add, like, I don't know, a few drops of something from a squeezy bottle, or I don't even know what form these things take. So initially, to start off sort of slow, I tried pretty much the full range of box mixes. I started off with Organ, which like, they're a very basic, free-from, gluten-free company, and they serve their purpose, but nothing's that amazing, and their bread was just like that. Like, it was really meh on all fronts. The taste wasn't that great, didn't rise that well, texture was so it's functional, but I would skip past it. You want something a bit more impressive, like Lorky's, which is super popular here. Like, I remember they have the largest range in all the major supermarkets, and it's yeast bread, but it's kind of in that, like, fancy bakery, artisan-y type of category. Yeah, I remember trying to get their gluten-free flour blend, I don't know, after the pandemic hit in 2020, and I literally was checking their website all the dang time. It's not something that they stock in supermarkets, but they do have a few varieties on their website. They were out of stock for like most of their products for a whole year. That's how much people panic bought their stuff. But I think my point is that it just goes to show that it's a lot of people's staple. The reason I sort of got onto it is I found some in our pantry that was really out of date but still functional, that my mum had maybe bought from like 10 years ago, and the flavour was so good. It was really, really yum. So then I bought Lorky's in the present day and wasn't as impressed. It has a really chalky, gritty texture, and the flavour, the recipe is different. It has this sort of weird mouldy cardboard aftertaste, so that was a bit of a funky letdown. I then tried Well Good, which have a lot of flour mixes, only have one box, a lot of packaging, crusty bread mix, very white bread, and I don't think it's very like versatile for your bread making adventures all the time. However, you will see me later when I cut to the different things I've made today make some garlic knots, and they're like very fun, you know, like bread basket. Everyone's gonna like them and not complain that they're gluten-free type category of thing, but you taste it and you're like, there's no nutrients really in here. This is just a fun bread experience. So I tried the No Knead Bread company of gluten-free mixes, and similar Lorky's in that it's a lot of people's like staple. Like, my grandmother used No Knead bread mixes for like 50 years. Like, they know what they're doing, but I just found the gluten-free mix to get to again be chalky, not the greatest texture, and just thought I could do better. But my favourite package mix was from the gluten-free food company. I think your best bet would be to buy it off the website, but it is coming into more like specialty independent supermarkets and health food stores. I approached them and they sent me some, but still yet to get my hands on it again. Yeah, it was a firm favourite. The flavour of this was unreal. Like, it was as yum, if not more yum, than wheat bread, which is like, what? And that was because of the lupin flour, which I think you've heard me go on about how it's great it tastes, and it's high in protein, so it just shows up structurally, good rise. But it was just so savoury and like had a like nutty, sweet, grainy type taste, which I was really digging. If I did have one critique though, is that the loaf was kind of cakey, but it wasn't too moist, so it's just like it was more bread you'd have for toast or bread you'd dunk in soup. It wouldn't be that great in a sandwich situation. I don't know though, I just ate it like by the slice with butter on it because it was that yum. So then I moved away from the box mixes and tried my hand at sourdough. I was reading and watching every video on the Fresh is Real blog, and she makes it look so easy, and she really draws you in and like takes you through it step by step. Yeah, so then I tried it and you're like, oh right, this isn't as easy. Like, I just got so stuck on making my starter. It was moldy all the time and took so long to bubble up. The flours I found I had the most success with were by far white rice, brown rice and millet flour, and the best situation I found, like dishwasher type level of clean, glass jar, not a cloth or anything, but a freshly bought coffee filter, put on the top with rubber band, and my goodness, people, put a rubber band around the top of your mix so you can just see how far it's rising. Otherwise you feel like you're going insane and can't really tell what's going on. I also used bottled water to add to it because I was just having mold issues. Fun. I haven't tried the regular sourdough process, but I just got the sense it took longer to activate. When you're working with gluten-free flours, you also often put like a hunk of pineapple or a piece of apple for like the sugars to help everything get going, but that just exacerbated my mold issues. So in the end, I think it was just brown rice flour and bottled fresh water was the most reliable combo. However, when I then went to use it, the bread that I made was so moist. It's kind of like eating Play-Doh, and yet the crumb was too spongy. The whole thing was just felt really heavy. Or when I made like a batter bread situation, which is really common in gluten-free baking, you make a batter and then you bake it and it turns into like a bread cake, but it is bread, but sort of feels like you just made a cake. It had too much moisture in it. In a bread cake situation, it's harder to get rid of it in the cooking process. What did I do? Then I moved away from bread mixes, moved away from sourdough, and had a seriously long relationship with an Erin McKenna recipe she has for like a white sandwich loaf. Now, I got good places with this. The taste and crumb that I got from early versions of this bread was so good, and it kept spurring me on. As you will be able to see from various images I took of my fails, I had a real issue with moisture and gumminess. It's a battered bread. I had to sub out the oat flour because I can't have oats, and I was using sorghum flour or a bit more millet, and those don't absorb moisture as much. So I had to like also use less xanthan gum and just troubleshoot my way out of the moisture issue. And literally it was like get the cake to hold its structure so it would rise, and then it'd be like, yes, it looks amazing, but then by the end of it, or as soon as you took it out of the oven, the interior would just collapse and form a massive gummy brick. But like the little bits attached to the top crust tasted so good, so I kept going. But by the time I pulled back the moisture, added more flour, the flour taste was just so overpoweringly sorghummy or millety, not the soft white bread. Like gently earthy I'm down for, but this was just too far. So after that, I really didn't know what to do, like what's left, what other options have I got. I do have other options, and I just haven't like tried the full spectrum of flours. But yeah, I paused a bit exhausted and feeling a bit defeated and uninspired. So what I did turn to one desperate time, I was just in a local supermarket that had some different things, and my eyes glanced over something I definitely brushed over and dismissed in the past, and that is an Australian brand of gluten-free flour mix that has been around forever. I think I thought it wasn't gluten-free, it was just regular wheat. It is FG Roberts, which are thoroughly available online and been around for yonks. I think how they first rose to like prominence is bringing in like soy flour for various purposes, but also realizing it does really help in the making of gluten-free bread. The general ingredients in their like traditional bread mix are maize, so corn flour, fine rice flour, psyllium, soy isolate, soy flour, enzyme active, dextrose, which is a sugar, methysol K4M, which is a plant derivative, mysterious ingredient, but I think it's just a cellular thing from a plant, and like doesn't sound that scary, and salt. And I whip this up. It's not a batter bread, it's a dough bread. You get to actually knead the thing. Like, thank you. That's really welcome after the shit weird am I even making bread experiences I've had. Yeah, it tastes delicious. The crumb's really good. It's an open crumb. And you can make a sandwich with it. Like, it's very bendy, and it has an almost brioche rip even. So yeah, satisfying. Obviously though, I'm really bummed and still disappointed and kind of feeling flat after my whole experience because, and I'm not just pointing you towards a recipe with just ingredients. It's a bread mix. Obviously not universally available, but yeah, I have come to the conclusion that it can be really hard if you're not using oats and you're not using eggs in gluten-free baking. And yeah, in this brand they use corn and soy, and those are allergens, but I think you've just got to find a middle ground and compromise somewhere to make it work in this field. And those two guys really show up structurally and texturally for your bread. So yeah, not perfect, obviously, but there are things I really want to continue experimenting with. I want to try more with psyllium husk powder in yeast bread to hold moisture, and it does wonderful things for structure. There are flours like cassava and quinoa flour that I think would be really great for taste, also lentil flour. I have got a bread method now and have had some super yummy success with other bread things like focaccia or English muffins. So yeah, do keep watching if you want to see me make them. If you're like, give me some proper takeaways, Phoebe. Here they are. No matter what gluten-free bread method you're going, batter or dough, box mix, your own thing, these are transferable multi-purpose tips that I've learned on negotiables just in the gluten-free bread world. So that is, unless you're making buns, which can be slightly different, or focaccia, if you're making anything resembling a baguette or larger, like a loaf, you just have to let it cool down completely. Gluten-free bread, the flours don't soak up moisture like wheat does in the same way. And they hold so much moisture, which makes rise frustrating, and you really have to let them cool down, essentially steam themselves and get rid of that moisture. Aaron Goyaga, whose breads are a dough method, she will even have you par cook your loaf in a tin or some sort of shape guide, then take it out and just put it directly on the oven wrap to help with that moisture evacuation. Lost the will to talk. I did try all of Aaron Goyaga's breads with psyllium husk gels. They just didn't work for me, I think because I don't have the access to the exact flour she uses. And yeah, the crumb just was a bit too moist for my liking and the crust a bit too hard. The other thing, especially if you're making a gluten-free bread that resembles a batter and then becomes a loaf of bread, just do not overproof them. Leave plenty of room in your tin. Don't let it rise to the lip of the tin because it's going to go over, and that makes it even harder for the inside of the bread to catch up and like everything to work out. Underproofing is almost better because it will just boing up even more in the oven, and when it's a battered bread it will just over the side. Like, it's not just going to stay up in a nice dome for the most part. The other thing is, don't undercook it. Make sure it sounds really hollow when you take it out of the oven, even if it looks too brown. Like, there's just no, unfortunately, too brown situation in gluten-free cooking. That's why I really want to keep troubleshooting the Erin McKenna recipe for white sandwich loaf, because that just didn't brown like a deeply stained bookcase. Yeah, the other thing is, if you're worried about it too brown, I would just reach metaphorically through the screen and say it's okay, because even though you'll take it out of the oven and it will be hard as a rock, all gluten-free bread, because there's so much moisture in it, and when you take them out of the oven, all that steam will be escaping. It will re-moisten, not really the right word, but re-soften, make it more malleable and squishy, the crust. So it's not going to be this like tough, half a centimetre, quarter inch crust all the way around. Just, it's not going to be that in the end. So now I will pass over to voiceover Phoebe to show you how I make 4 different things that I'm happy with. But yeah, still a work in progress. Apologies I don't have all the answers. Just a bit of a beast. But hopefully I've saved you from making a few mistakes and maybe pointed you in the direction of a good brand so you don't have to waste a whole bunch of dosh. On to the actual bread. So we're going to be making garlic knots, English muffins, focaccia, and a sandwich loaf type of white bread situation. So starting off with the focaccia, which uses the F.J. Roberts traditional bread mix. It's a very similar method to the loaf we're going to make, the difference being you add a heck ton more water. Look how moist that looks. Yeah, and a little bit of oil to help with the spongy moistness of the dough. As you will see with a lot of the gluten-free doughs, this one was too moist to knead. You just sort of shape it with a tool. They look a bit lumpy and then like they've got a bit of an issue, but don't worry, through the rising and cooking time or kneading whatever the recipe requires, they just don't look so lumpy in the end. So be forgiving. Don't push down the focaccia if you make this. Just sort of gently stretch it and keep turning it to coat it in oil. I've done this with potato, with rosemary, even pumpkin and olives and sea salt. All are good. I would recommend adding something because it really takes on flavour and is delicious with something on top. I half cooked it with covered in foil just because I like a lightly browned Exhibit A, and let her cool completely. So for the white loaf, very similar. You use the FJ traditional bread mix again, add less water, do your yeast thing, and instead of adding sugar to this one, you add white vinegar, which I think are interchangeable. Vinegar and sugar really help yeast to rise. You don't put salt in your yeast rising moment because that kills the yeast. Fun fact. I know I said like it's such a joy, this one, because you get to knead it. I was just feeling a bit like, I'll cut corners here because I'm making a heck ton of bread today, so I opted for the stand mixer. Then when I was shaping it with my hands, I used rice flour on the board. That's a really great flour, not brown rice but just regular rice flour. You could use brown rice too, but white sort of shows up less. And I did this because it doesn't sort of create a crust, it just sort of disappears into the loaf, which is really nice. And then I used this lovely stainless steel bread thing to shape it. You just sort of keep tucking the bread under the bottom, and that helps get like a smooth, nice, dewy, plump, peachy top. Then I created a bum effect. I would just make one sort of long, loggy type thing next time because, as you'll see, well, I did overproof this slightly, but we'll just skip right past that. And that's just me spraying it with a bit of oil to help with the crust. The tops of it don't really, emerge like a butt. They sort of blend into one another and look like two uneven mountain tops, so learn from me. Okay, the English muffin recipe, I guess, is the most complicated. It uses, instead of water, you heat milk and you add yeast to that and make that all frothy and delicious. And then you use a mix of flours. It's really flexible. I've used tapioca starch, brown rice flour and sorghum. Mix that together, and this recipe uses yeast as well as baking powder to help with the rise, and then also flax seeds, which, similar to psyllium husk, helps with structure and rise, and like a nice open crumb, which looks a bit like a crumpet, and just, yes, it's a bit different to an English muffin, but what it is fabulous. Oh, look at that wholemeally goodness. Yeah, these are quite dark from the teff flour. You wouldn't use all teff flour. That's used a lot in Ethiopian cuisine cooking because it's very wholemeal, but it has a really nice nuttiness, and the crust on these is like crummy and nutty and sweet. And I'm just noticing Merle is in the background to all of this, and that's like a really nice full circle moment because we've come so far and he really is just a lovely kitchen companion these days. Anyway, there's them looking lovely. Let them cool. Then the garlic knots using Well and Good Crusty Bread mix, which is definitely available at Woolworths. I think it must be at Coles as well. Everything's sort of pre-packaged for you, but I guess these are a fun thing, so skipping right past that. You follow the recipe as they say until you get to the folding situation. As you can see from the consistency of the flour mix, it's quite chalky, meaning it's very high in starches, like tapioca and arrowroot, and that contributes to the very white bread roll situation. So then I put it on a board, and I am sort of kneading this, but you don't knead gluten-free doughs in the same aggressive way you might with wheat doughs, because there's no gluten, and so it doesn't like spring back on itself, it just breaks. So it's more shaping and just encouraging that smooth finish, and I'm doing that tuck under method, and then just chopping it into 6. Mine could have been far more even, lol. And this is where I've turned them into knots. So take one section, roll it into a little rectangle. This isn't a precise science in any sense. I think if I did it in future, I would just mix the parsley into the dough. Then you saw me cut it down the middle, leaving it connected at the top, twist the strands over each other, and then roll them into a ball, and then you've got your knot. Also, making these smaller would maybe make them a bit less beastly, but they're not exactly filling, so great with soup, great to just consume. Then I let them rise with a damp tea towel on top to help the tops not sort of crack and dry out. Then I just brush them with sunflower oil, And yeah, baked them. In the meantime, I made a garlic butter type situation. I used garlic oil instead of actual garlic to just make it a bit less intense for my system, aka low FODMAP. Yeah, and then that was parsley, lots of flaky salt, and a bit of vegan butter. Melt that together, add your knots to it, and toss them to coat in the garlicky, parsley, salty goodness. And this is a recipe you can definitely eat warm. Not piping hot, but definitely don't have to worry about them cooling completely. Yum! I would try and make them a bit smaller next time. It's just, I don't know, a little fiddly because, as I said, gluten-free dough doesn't quite stretch back on itself. So here's the texture of all the different things. Yeah, overproof this one, that's why it has a little hole in the top, but I'm really happy with that because nice and fluffy, and the crust isn't too dark, which I don't know, I'm a bit pernickety about. Yeah, everything's delicious. Here's my face expressing that. Yeah, these are really nutty, really nice, and you know, they taste like there's goodness in them, not just like starchy squish. Not knocking that. The focaccia is epic. Add all the flaky salt and rosemary to the top, and I only had a bit of this because I was a bit breaded out. But yeah, it's delicious. Everything, I'm really proud of the progress and troubleshooting journey I've been on. I hope this helped you discover a thing or two, avoid mistakes in your gluten-free vegan journey if you're on that. And I'd love to hear anything you've tried and had success with down below. Lots of love and see you soon. Bye!